Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. We have a holiday weekend and lots of hockey news today, but we'll start off with a pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Hey, first, my heart goes out to Thomas. Apparently he's got real problems with sewage backup and stuff in his house from the flood. Sorry to hear that. Hopefully it gets better for you. It was probably within 6 miles of my house, but it got a little scary because you just never know which way a tornado is going to go. But it did flatten about 12 houses near me. And so, one of those things. But I do feel bad for anybody that is affected in the area.
Well, and we welcome Joe Yurden to the show, and we're live, Joe. So no swearing.
Oh, dang it. Okay.
Yeah. Gosh darn it. But no, Russ, it's funny because this morning I saw the story, and it's not just Jersey. Apparently in New York City, there was a lot of flooding, especially on Wednesday night. And John Sterling, the Yankee announcer, driving back from the stadium because him and Susan Waldman and the crew, Michael Kay and the TV crew, they all do the broadcasts from the stadium. Sterling got stranded going back to his apartment, stuck in his car, and Ricky Ricardo, who is the bilingual, the Spanish-speaking announcer.
Yeah, he's been on here in Philly too. I know.
Yeah, he drove back to basically save Sterling from getting trapped in his car because the water was rising in the area, and he, could have been life-threatening.
That was really great. Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder why in a situation like that they didn't just let him do the Yankee game from at home. Like, we all knew that day.
It happened after.
I know it happened after, but I knew that morning there was going to be a problem,
right,
and I planned my day accordingly, and I got home about 2 hours before the problem. That's all I'm saying. They could have predicted that this would happen, and to have an 80-year-old guy on the road just doesn't seem like a good idea for anybody. But at any rate, let's talk for a minute about Tom Brady, who figures this offseason he's won all these Super Bowls, so you have to listen to him. And I have to tell you, there's been some insufferable athletes back in the day, but I don't mind if you're brash and cocky and you got the hardware. That's fine. But don't act like you reinvented the sport and you know everything about the sport and basically the rest are inferior. And so today he's doing some sort of Buccaneers talk. And, of course, if you're the host, you basically just give Tom Brady a question and then just move aside because he's going to filibuster for like the next half hour, And Tom Brady was talking about how the rules should change in the NFL for, hard hits over the middle or hard hits for the quarterback, because if it happens, that's on you. That's on you, the quarterback. Tom Brady's like, I never threw near Ray Lewis. I never did that. It's like, Tom, A, people make mistakes. Sometimes you throw a ball and it doesn't go exactly where you want it. You remember interceptions. That's happened to you. And B, I bet you we could go back and find footage of somebody getting creamed from the New England Patriots, because either Tom's going to get creamed or he's going to get creamed if it's third down and you need a first down. It's so easy to say when you're sitting in shorts and you've got a mic next to you and you've got all these Super Bowls, but don't act like every quarterback can control this and the NFL's wrong for, calling penalties. But what's your guys' thoughts?
What was funny to me was he made it a point to say that a lot of the bad hits that happen now happen because the quarterback and the receiver aren't on the same page. And, sure, back in the day, hard hits always happen, but I don't know, man. I don't think now it's absolved from that. There's not as many huge hits now, but anything that we see now is at least mostly clean, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for me to fathom that. You look back in the day, when you had guys like Marino or Steve Young or Joe Montana, or all these incredible quarterbacks, and guys were still getting killed over the middle. You tell me it was their fault, or it was just a product of that day. No, even today, Peyton Manning, I'm sure, has gotten some guys killed. I'm sure Eli Manning's gotten some guys killed.
Yeah,
Tom Brady's definitely got some guys killed. So I don't know, man. Just he's off into the sunset, bro.
Ask Wes Welker how he's doing right now, because he took a beating with all those passes over the middle that Brady threw to him in New England. And the funny thing is, in terms of the quarterbacks only seem to get hurt now when it's like it's a act of God, or like a real like somebody getting undercut, and it was not the defensive lineman going at his knee. It was like the defensive lineman getting knocked down, or the offensive lineman getting knocked down, and the quarterback trips over him and hurts himself. It just seems like those injuries are almost mistakes rather than purposeful. And I mean, there's no Darryl Stingley's anymore. It doesn't.
But the point is, don't tell me Tom Brady has never made a mistake throwing the ball, and every ball goes exactly where he wants it. And if it doesn't, it's the receiver's fault. Just stop. That was what I heard.
Well, I love that it's the receiver's fault, but also that he's looking to help his receivers out by saying, to save them. This is another video that I saw where he wants to save his receivers by saying that you can't tackle them below the knees, which I agree with. He says there's rules against everybody else getting hit below the knees, but except for
that's
receivers.
fine. I agree with them too.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I think it's classic Brady where he's kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth, and it comes off looking great. But I don't know. I've come off of so much of the early on, like just like 10 years ago, even like hating on Brady. Like the dude's incredible, but like I don't know. Sometimes these guys just gotta just pipe down a little bit, like ease up. Like he's like what 43 now.
Yeah,
right,
but I mean,
Tom,
Johnny Unitas was like the greatest quarterback in the league for like a decade or more. He played into his 40s also. We didn't hear from Johnny Unitas every 12 seconds. He could have. He could have been on every interview he wanted to be. He was the quarterback.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll just say this, and when it comes to the NFL, first of all, I'm still pissed off the fact that they took a week off in between. So they gave college football their weekend. We have to wait until September 12th for the first week of the NFL season. Second of all, be prepared for the most annoying penalty of the year, not being offensive holding, not being pass interference, but this blocking, this new penalty for blocking below I think it's the offensive lineman cannot go and undercut a defensive player when that used to be acceptable. Now it's a 10-yard penalty. This is going to trust me, there will be great plays called back because of blocks that are not really harmful at all, but this is them going the nth degree.
What I see happening is a lineman tripping, some running back pushing him in the back, and then he falls and does that. Is that still going to be a penalty? It does sound different than a chop block, Funky, but I get what you're saying about the chop block. But
chop block. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I'd say as far as penalties that are going to make people really mad, it's the accent on taunting. That's going to really bother me. Like some guy gets up and then he does the first down, chucks the ball down, and so, some doofus referee is just going to be like, no, can't do that. And hearing the Giants, I don't know if he's the owner or the team president saying like, this is something we really wanted to zero in on, these last few years. Like, dude, like there are 1,000 other problems with football. And
what the Giants should zero in on? An offensive line. Zero in on that. Yeah.
Try to not get Saquon broken again.
I think that was Gettleman who said that, and he's an old fart. But yeah. Remember last year, and I don't know if it was in the playoffs or during the regular season, Josh Allen gets penalized for spinning the ball in the end zone.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, give me a friggin' break. Okay, we're going to allow the team dance situation where they all do their Michael Flatley Lord of the Dance routine, but a guy can't spin the ball, or how about stopping the guy from going first down and all that stuff after every play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so goofy. Just let guys express themselves. Even baseball's come off of that stuff this year. I mean, seeing guys flipping the bats, nobody's really getting beamed over that
cleats,
stuff now.
They're allowing guys to wear different cleats. Yeah.
Right. Like just if baseball's able to ease up, football can definitely ease up.
Yeah.
All right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, September 3rd, 2021.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. And we are joined by veteran reporter Joe Yerdon, who is an expert on the Buffalo and the NHL scene. And we'll touch on all that today, starting with the big announcement. But for everybody who's, popping champagne corks and telling Russ and Mike were wrong, no, we're not, because this Olympic announcement, it's sort of Olympics are a go, kinda. Okay, here's the report. The NHL, its Players Union and International Olympic Committee, and the IIHF struck a deal Friday that will put the best players in the world back on the sport's biggest stage in February in Beijing. Now, part of this agreement, no COVID-19 insurance.
Which is, by the way, the biggest thing I talked about. And so I was right about that, but I didn't think they would do it without the COVID-19 insurance, and apparently they might.
Well, this is the reason why there are so many clauses here, Joe, because according to the report, the agreement between the four parties allows for the possibility of a later decision to withdraw in the event evolving COVID conditions are deemed by the NHL, NHLPA to render participation by NHL players to be impractical or unsafe. And part of that is if NHL games get canceled before the Olympic break, and they have no means of being able to make those games up without not going to the Olympics, that's enough of a reason to not go to the Olympics. So this is like, we want to go, we're going to go if, and the if is the big thing.
Well, I think that's where the protocols the NHLPA and the NHL agreed on for their own for the NHL season to come into play in a big way, because they are, of all the leagues, the NHL is going to be dropping the hammer on guys that aren't getting vaccinated and are costing themselves the games, because they're going to cost themselves checks. And I know the NFL's stepped up and done their thing where if a game gets postponed, everybody doesn't get paid that week. It turns into a forfeit. But I think in this situation for the NHL, because you have so many more games, if you're going to be a dumbass and not get inoculated, get vaccinated, and say, I'll risk it, and then if you miss games because of COVID, well, goodbye paycheck. And honestly, that's the way it should be, because there's no excuse not to. And apparently the word is 95% of players are vaccinated, which is good. Yeah. But what percent, out of that 5% that's not, how many of them are potential Olympic guys? How many are possible superstar players where they're just deciding, no, I'm not going to do this because I don't need to? Like, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see. But this Olympic agreement does not get made unless the NHL and the NHLPA go that hard on themselves to get it taken care of.
Yeah, so two things. I will answer Funky and say, yeah, if they play, I don't know what that is.
It's my turn.
Okay. If they play, yes, I'm wrong. But guess what? We're a long way from playing. The other thing is, on this particular front, so like Joe said, 95% of players are vaccinated. So I'm going to guess that an unvaccinated player can't play in the Olympics.
Yes, that's the case.
Yeah. So, I mean, it only makes sense. Like, there's no reason to risk it. And that's not even like a political thing. It's just common sense. Just, right. If you're not vaccinated, we already saw the problems. It happened with the Summer Olympics, where people were bringing Delta variant over, and that was getting passed around in the villages. And it was just like, right. Okay, even some of the other variants have gotten around there. So it's like, don't bring it to another place. Bringing that stuff to the Olympics, man, just nobody needs that.
So then the next thing would be, so let's say player X comes down or is in COVID protocol or is close watch, whatever, 5 days before they're going to leave for the Olympics, doesn't play an NHL game, but then says, okay, I'll see you guys. I'll be back after the Olympic break. Is that going to be allowed?
I don't know. I mean,
you can see there's a lot of gray areas in this little agreement here.
I think if somebody is, if they're supposed to be on the Olympic team and then they come up with a positive test, sorry, like right before the break happens, I don't know, man. Is that something where you're getting tested before you're hopping on the plane, and then if you're clear, you go? I mean, I don't think so. I don't even think it gets to go that far.
I think they're going to have a massive testing situation happening at the All-Star game. Because remember, the All-Star game, I think, is February 4th and 5th in Vegas. And then all the players who are I would assume all the players that are part of the All-Star festivities and maybe the other players who didn't make the All-Star team who are going to the Olympics are all leaving from Vegas for Beijing. I will bet you anything they're testing them up the wazoo before they get on the plane to make sure that they're okay. And they have to have backups in terms of like players that they're going to include on the, although there's probably a cutoff in terms of the roster. So they have to make sure that these guys are COVID negative before they even get on the plane.
So a player can't now beg out of the All-Star game and play in the Olympics. That's not going to fly.
What? No, but
that's a good question.
That is.
I was wondering that too, because I mean it's a 1-game suspension if you bolt from that. But like IHF doesn't care about that. They're like, great, cool. You want to get ready for us? That's awesome. But like, I don't know. It's really interesting because I don't know if I'm in that spot. Like if I'm Patrick Kane and I know I'm playing for the United States and I know I'm probably going to get voted to the All-Star game, I'm probably thinking, yeah, do I really need to go to Vegas for a few days? And well, maybe he does, but like, but maybe some of the other guys are just like, you know what? Maybe I just need some time to gear up, hang out with my family, and then head over to China.
Maybe that'll be an opportunity for somebody from Team Canada to slash him on the ankle and do a Valerie Harlamoff and knock him out of the Olympics. Who knows? Or vice versa.
That's what we need, a whole big brawl at the All-Star game.
But this is an iffy proposition. It could happen for sure, but we also see where there's a possibility that it doesn't happen either, because even if you got, I don't know, 3 or 4 big stars, if they had gotten COVID or injured or sick or something, I could see it derailing the whole plan, because there's only so much of a team they're going to be able to field and then be able to, put in reserves at the last minute.
Is that the message you were?
No, it was way before that. But China does have a lot of hockey potential, and that's why they invited Wayne Gretzky out there. But that still doesn't mean it's a good idea to go. I think it's we have to see. Everything's a wait and see. So like this is like, hey, the Olympics are a wait and see. That's what they are.
Well, okay. Referencing what Joe was talking about regarding the COVID protocols for the NHL, Elliot Friedman reported that yesterday, and the highlights are that teams can suspend unvaccinated players who are unable to participate in club activities. But they had a caveat there if it's against their religious beliefs or some, they gave some of these players an out, but clearly the NHL is like, we're going to try, we want to get as many players vaccinated, and the players that are unvaccinated, like Cole Beasley in the NFL, they're really going to have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to participate in certain things and avoid getting sick. And if they do, they're going to lose money on this.
I think the NFL left the door open for a lot more stuff. There's crackdowns and whatnot, but they're counting on teams being so vaccinated that you really won't have to stress it too much as far as like the whole team getting punished. But some teams have fewer people than others. Buffalo's certainly one of them. Where they, every Buffalo fan should be worried that, right before an AFC championship game, that's, 3 guys are going to miss that. And then suddenly they're toast. But the NHL, it's different. Honestly, if somebody's going to claim religious exception for a vaccination, I'd be really interested to hear what their argument is and what religion is, because as far as I know, every major religion does not have, a non-mask thing to go with it. Like none of them do.
I think Christian scientists, they don't even want people to go to hospitals, let alone take vaccines. So there's certain groups that try to avoid that. But
let's use the recent Carson Wentz press conference as an example. So let's say you don't have a health problem,
right?
And you just come out and say, hey, you know what? I don't tell you what to do. You don't have to tell me what to do. It's my decision. That's great. But then you're the most important player on the team. You're a part of a team. That comes off very selfish, because if Carson Wentz comes down with COVID again, he'll be guaranteed to miss a couple of games. And if you miss the playoffs by a couple of games, who do you think your teammates are going to look at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like the conversation that happened in Buffalo where Isaiah McKenzie got lots of crap on social media for basically bragging about being fined by the league for flaunting not wearing a mask around the facility because, again, big problem. And the next day he posts to Instagram, posts his vaccination card. He's like, all right, it's for the better for the team. Like, yeah, like if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your freaking team at least. I mean, these guys are all brought up in sports where team is the most important thing. And you're just going to say, nah, I don't think so. If I got to get suspended, fine, I'll stick it to the man.
But to your point before, Joe, we know Beasley, who's a key player for them in their offense. And I believe Josh Allen was very sort of dancing around during the offseason. Was he going to get vaccinated? Was he not going to get vaccinated? These are key players. If they do get sick late in the season for a game or during the playoffs, that's the difference between advancing and not advancing. So, I get certain people don't want to take the vaccine. I get the reasons why, but in a professional sport where it's a team concept, I think you have to think of the team more than yourself.
It's not even getting sick now, Mike, because if you're unvaccinated and you're near someone that's iffy, you're now not allowed to play. Whether you get it or not, you could have a negative test, and they're like, it doesn't matter. You're out 5 days.
Beasley and McKenzie were quarantined for 5 days, and they were negative. Just because some trainer was positive, they had to stay away from the team. So yeah.
So what if that's what I'm saying? What if that happens on a team's bye week? That guy's out. Like all of a sudden, you're out. And
well, I think that's going back to the team concept, though. I think that's where the NHL succeeds because there's no other sport that is more do it for the team than hockey. And I mean, these guys, that's all they talk about all the time is that, never the individual. It's always the team. Very, very few times is it very individualistic, but they stress team so much. So if you got a whole team, if you got a bunch of guys that are like, just do it, dude, I'm doing it. Like, hey, maybe I don't want to get it, but I'm getting it because, it's better for us because we'll be able to do more stuff. We'll be able to hang out together on the road. Like if you're not vaccinated, some of the road stipulations are crazy. You basically have to live in your hotel room on the road if you're not vaccinated. Like you can't hang out with your teammates, can't go to restaurants, can't go sit in the hotel bar, can't go anywhere.
You're guaranteed to miss X amount of practices for the year. Like there's no way you're gonna skate the whole year without missing practices because you're gonna come in contact with somebody because it's gonna happen.
Now,
one give you the benefit of the doubt.
One interesting thing, though, one date to put in your mental calendar is October 1st, because by October 1st, players can opt out of this year if they wish to, and the team has 30 days to decide whether they want to burn the year or toll it to the following year. So, really it gives, depending on the player, it gives the team a lot of control in terms of what they want to do contractually. So, it's very, very interesting stuff that came out today in the last couple of days regarding the Olympics. And I'm sure we'll see a number of things unfold. I know the U.S. just named they didn't bother naming the assistant coaches until today. I think it was John Hines. I just had it here. Hold on a second. I'll just pull it up. Let's see. Sorry about this.
I'm going to tell you, Michael Cohen said, if there's no Olympics, Mike, our ratings go up.
There you go. John Hines, David Quinn, Todd Reardon, and Ryan Miller will be Mike Sullivan's assistants at the Olympics.
Well, that's good for David Quinn. I think that that will help him in his search down the line to get another coaching job, because when he was on a friend's show of mine that I know, and when he was fired, basically the excuse was, well, we just need a new voice. At the end of the day, it came down to that. And, and he wasn't satisfied with that. And I don't blame him for that. That's not, to me, it wasn't really like a good enough reason. So this will help him get back on track.
Joe, we have less than 24 hours to go, I believe, until the drop dead for the Jesperi Kotkaniemi offer sheet. The Canadians have held on and held on and held on. And obviously, we keep hearing one person says they're going to match it. The next person says they're not going to match it. Before the announcement is made, let's get your opinion whether you think they're going to match or not match.
I think they're not going to match. I think I know when they did this to Aho a couple of years ago, everybody knew Carolina announced that they were going to match it no matter it was like within not even a day. They were just like, yeah, listen, we're matching it. But they waited the full week to get it to make it official, which that's what you can do. Like you can decide immediately. I think this time though, Montreal's got a real tough decision on their hand. This is where I think the salary makes it so you just say, no, we'll take your first and a third. Like, thank you very much. Because based on the fact that Kotkaniemi was in and out of the lineup through their playoff run, which was so strange.
Because of him. It wasn't because of him. Like, if we go back to that, Joe, they had Caulfield in and out of the lineup early on. They did so many weird things with Ducharme, and I know he got the job, but he also made a lot of questionable decisions along the way.
But like that's, Jake Evans had basically taken Kotkaniemi's job away in the playoffs. And $6 million for him. That's a lot. I mean, that's too much as far as I'm concerned. And that considering that's his qualifying number.
We all agree on that. It is too much.
But Carolina, they go over the cap because of this. Like Montreal can really stick it back to them if they decide to do this. Because then I don't know who you're moving out of Carolina to get yourself back under the cap.
Well, I mean, they can find somebody to. Well, Jake Gardner would go on LTIR probably. Mm-hmm. I think that gets them under the cap. But the funny thing with Kotkaniemi is Evans got hurt in the first game of the Toronto series. Kotkaniemi comes in, he scores an overtime goal in that series, and then Evans gets back in the lineup. He gets hurt against Winnipeg. Kotkaniemi stays in the lineup until the Stanley Cup final when Evans comes back. So it was always a battle with. I mean, and I understand them liking Evans because he's a feisty type of player, but really, I think they've mismanaged Kotkaniemi for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
They really.
Absolutely. And that's their own fault for doing that. I mean, I don't think you necessarily needed him in the NHL immediately. It reminded me a little bit of how
did not.
Yeah. It reminded me a bit of how Atlanta back in the day mismanaged Burmistrov and brought him in right away instead of just like, hey, stay another year in Russia and we'll bring you in. In this case, Kotkaniemi would have definitely benefited by staying in Finland for another year, but you can't go back and change history, but there's no doubt. And this happens to Montreal all the time. You take a kid that high in the draft, and they did, Kotkaniemi was very high up. There's a ton of pressure to be able to be in there right away. And sometimes that isn't the right plan. I mean, not every number 3 pick is going to go right away to the NHL. That shouldn't be the case. But considering a lot of teams thought they overstepped where they thought he was going to go. And I know that draft was a little different because there was a lot of buildup leading into that, hey, this kid might go a lot higher than people think. And then Montreal grabs him, top 5, I think it was that year.
3.
Top 5, he's number 3. So, it's just, it's the Montreal market. It's the pressure. And it's also, just thinking like, okay, we got a good young center. We need a center. He's in.
But Russ, everything is okay. Stop the presses. If Kotkaniemi, if they don't match that contract, everything is fine in Montreal because Jonathan Drouin came out and said he can play center.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get that Kotkaniemi's not worth the money. I totally get it. But I also see that there is no solution for the Canadians out there. Dvorak's not really a solution either, not in my eye. He's a decent center, but he's not a second-line center on a good team, not on a playoff team.
I don't think they're a good team. See, that's the funny thing.
They still could be a good team.
Without
Weber, another day.
Without Weber, with Price out maybe the first month, although he says he'll be back for the start of the regular season. I don't think they're as good as they were. So
maybe not as good as they were, but you have to just get through the regular season. And the point that everybody's missing is he gets you through the regular season. I think still there's a chance they're going to match it. They have some funkiness that they could do as well with Paul Byron and whatever his, what if they all of a sudden say, hey, Paul Byron's had a setback? I mean, are we all going to just sit there and say, there's no way? Because, so I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that Bergevin is not going to want to just hand it over and take the picks because it puts the team in a bad spot right now. It'll put them in a bad cap spot if they keep him. So there's no good situation, but I still think there's a chance he stays. It's just because we all think that, it's done. Look at the cap. Look at everything. There's no way they can do it. There's always a way when there's finagling going on in a cap world, and teams have figured out other things. So who knows? Yeah.
We'll see tomorrow. One way or the other, we'll find out tomorrow, or maybe even before then. In the ever unfolding story of the Arizona Coyotes, they apparently have submitted a bid to transform 46 acres of land in Tempe, Arizona, for an arena and entertainment district. Now, the thing here is they've been in talks for this tract of land for 2 years, and they finally secured this bid, or submitted the bid. But they even admit in the story I think it was the Arizona Republic, that the arena is years away. So the question is, Joe, I mean, okay, they're playing in Gila River this season, and then they have no home, and really there's no viable option unless Gila River allows them to go year by year, which it doesn't sound like they're going to do, for an arena in the Phoenix area, unless they go back to what used to be the America West, which is, I don't think has been used since the Suns left. I mean, they're really in a pickle here.
Yeah, it's not an enviable spot for them. The way I see it is Glendale's probably looking for a bit more money if they're going to use that arena again. That's what it reeks out to me. That if they're going to let them in, they're going to be like, well, if we let you back in, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay a lot more money than you have in the past. And I don't know that the Coyotes are in the spot to do that. But I know that their new ownership does not like to get pushed around like that either. So this is a sticky one. I don't know what the right move is here for the Coyotes, other than trying to make something work with Gila River, because if you're going to go back to the old Suns arena, I mean, I don't know, like that place didn't really work the last time.
They probably have a Roenick jersey still hanging in the locker room. That's how unused that place is.
Yeah, but I'm not envious at all of the Coyotes management, because this is a terrible spot to be in. I mean, they've always been hanging on by a thread. It seems like forever. And they're always kind of there at Gila River on the whims of the city of Glendale City Council. And now that the city council said, like, all right, that's it, that we're done. Like that, we're done with this. You guys got to go. I don't know if this had happened, 8 years ago, that means they would have moved. They would have moved. Seattle would have had a hockey team already for the last 8 years, or Winnipeg would have gotten the original team back. So this is all it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see it play out. And I don't really see the definite answer coming up here, because that Tempe thing, it's been kicked around for a little bit now that they were looking at doing that. And they were looking at teaming up with Arizona State to pull it off. And Arizona State just built their own facility to play hockey in. So they're set. Like they don't need a 18,000 seat arena to play in. Absolutely not. Like 3,000 seats, which I think is what that place holds. Fine. That's perfect.
Well, but, the interesting thing is there's a website called Venues Now that showed an article that was done, and there was a story, a study was done, a private study by a firm, and they were like, well, if we don't have the Coyotes, what's it going to take to replace that revenue? And Joe, it would only take 20 concerts, or a combination of like concerts, professional bull riding events, things like that. What they basically said was 20 would make up the difference for the 43 games, because those people actually spend about $58 a person other than the ticket, and hockey fans there only spend about $27 a ticket. So the hockey fans are not eating out there. They're not, so all this thing that we've been hearing for years, like, hey, we really support the team, whatever, but you're not supporting the infrastructure. And that's what they're basically pointing out. This is why I don't think Glendale will take any amount of money, because they're just flushing money to have people show up to work to a half-empty arena, and I don't think they're going to do it anymore.
And
I just one question about that study. I'm sorry, Mike. That does that count what the restaurants and the bars pull in around that arena, or is that strictly based off concessions and what's bought inside?
I'm going to read it to you. Concert goers, he said, as an example, spend more than hockey fans on food and drink, 58 per person compared with 27 in the arena or Westgate Entertainment District.
Okay.
And I've been there.
That's honestly shocking because there's some good restaurants there.
That's a damning
really nice bars,
but it just shows that's what it's eroded to.
I mean, there are tons of restaurants there. There's the Jimmy Buffett place. There's a few other places there. Mm-hmm. Food, pretty decent food area. I mean, this is the thing. There's proposed build arena in Tempe. It's on the right side of Phoenix, next to Scottsdale. So that that argument is gone. But the problem here is, if that argument which they've been saying for years is wrong, then they'll have built an 18,000 seat arena and then they still won't be able to fill it. And that's the disaster scenario, locking yourself into probably a 20 to 25 year lease on a new building and still not being able to fill it. And then you have an albatross, what has been an albatross for most of the last 20 years. It continues to be an albatross for another 20 years. Honestly, I think they should cut and run, but I've thought that for a decade.
No, but based on this study, I don't think Glendale's letting them back in. I don't think they're looking for money. They're looking to actually turn this place around a bit and saying this is a waste of everything for everybody. Because remember, there's parking that's involved.
That's why Joe is saying they're going to have to pay through the nose. I mean, because if they have nowhere else to go, they're probably, the ownership.
Have they even paid their bill yet? Remember, a few months ago, they weren't even paid up yet.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
A couple of years ago, there was some of the players' paychecks were showing up a bit late. So yeah.
So I mean, there's a host of things wrong here. But of course, with this bid, which is all it is, it's a bid, and it will take a couple years. Where are they playing for the next 2 years? And
you brought up the point about there will have to be a referendum because there will be taxes, infrastructure tied to this arena. The earliest that referendum could happen would be next November. Now that means they have to find a building for next year. And then what if it doesn't pass? If it doesn't pass, then the same thing happens all over again. Then they were without a home after the following season. At a certain point, there has to be a crap or get off the pot moment. And
this feels like they're buying time.
Yes,
they're buying time to get something figured out. Whether it's with Glendale or whether it's with maybe maybe not necessarily America West, but maybe the current Suns Arena, which I don't think can hold a hockey rink.
Yeah, I've never heard that it's retrofitted.
So I don't think they want to do a Brooklyn situation there, but I mean, if you're buying time, maybe it's
Arizona State didn't want to partner with them.
But maybe you play at Arizona State and you're only going to have 3,000 people at the game. That's bad.
Yeah, that's when I think Gary Bettman steps in and says, "All right, no, that's all right. That's enough, guys."
He's going to have to step in before that, Joe, because they're going to get to a point, I would say, right around July, maybe even June, and they're going to have to know before they put out the schedule, where are they playing?
Yeah. But I don't know. All the signs have been pointing towards Fertitta in Houston jumping in and eventually buying this team because he wants hockey in Houston. And whether that's going to happen, I know fans in Quebec City are going to be ultra pissed about it, but I mean, if the NHL is going to lose a market as big as Phoenix, taking on Houston, and I know how everybody feels about fan bases in Houston, whatever. I get it, but if you're going to lose a major market like Phoenix, you need another one to replace it. That's where a city like Houston comes in.
And geographically, it makes all the sense with the Central Division, with Dallas in the division. It adds up. I mean, it's a top 10 TV market, and so is Phoenix. So
the one thing I wonder about the whole thing is, I don't think Houston would agree to anything until they see how the voting goes for Tempe. And that, I think, is going to put them in a precarious position to get a temporary home.
Well, looking back on how things went with the Coyotes when they're going through all this before, when Chipman and Winnipeg were waiting on the line for him, and then even Seattle. They had people in place. The NHL had people in place ready to go if they had to move. Like Chipman was there waiting for in Winnipeg, and then if the city council vote went against the Coyotes, they were getting the call the next day, like, okay, you're getting your team.
Russ,
Same thing for Seattle, and I think this would be a case where that might happen again, because if it comes down, to this referendum in Tempe, you need to have somebody ready to buy them and take them somewhere else, or you tell Marullo, you got to go. Like, you got to take it somewhere else, man. Like, that's just the way it's got to be.
Yeah, I don't think that this is going to be a situation where they're going to move this team for a couple of years while a building is getting built. They're moving for good. They're going someplace else.
The issue is, and again, like Esmir said, is Kansas City still an option? And we talked about it about a week ago. Their arena gets about 8,000 or something. So
no, their new building is 15 or 16. Or
but they draw about 8.
Oh no, yeah,
I don't think they're drawing more than 10 for an NHL game. That's the problem.
Right.
I think the issue is they are going to need to announce a temporary place to play probably before they find out about Tempe. I don't think it's all going to magically fall into place because, as we know, government stuff tends to drag on. And so I don't know what the answer is going to be. They don't know what the answer is going to be, but it's going to be really hard for them to sell season tickets next year. Like, especially, let's just give this scenario. So season's winding down, a month to go in the season. That's when you start seeing the stuff about next year's season tickets. How are they going to do that, Joe?
Yeah. They act like it's normal, but like, that's all you can do. Like, you can buy, like, you'll be able to buy the tickets through the team. It's just, you don't know where those tickets are going to be. But I mean, it's a terrible spot. It's just a terrible spot. And just one note on Kansas City, the word out of Kansas City has always been the only way that they'll take a team into that arena is if they have local ownership. They don't want somebody essentially carpetbagging in and saying like, all right, we're making our roots here, then taking off when it either it does or if it doesn't work, they're just saying like, oh, all right, we're bolting out of town. They already had that happen with the Scouts. Like,
the one last thing that Mike pointed out to me, which he was right about, is like when the Islanders were doing this, the Coliseum got an upgrade. That's what saved that whole situation. Mm-hmm. None of these places are going to be able to get an upgrade in time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, some interesting contracts being signed over the last 72 hours. We'll start with the most recent one. Drake Batherson, a 6-year deal with the Ottawa Senators at just a little tinge under $5 million a year. I mean, Russ, I like Batherson. He's had one pretty decent year. And the philosophy here, just like, and we'll talk about Farabee in a second, is, okay, we want to be proactive and get these guys locked up to a reasonable deal before they put up big numbers, because then it'll be really costly. What do you think of Batherson's deal?
Yeah, I think they were helped by the Flyers so they could pay him a little less. I don't want to sound cynical on that, but I think that's exactly what happened because Batherson, has played just a little under what Farabee plays. So I think they managed to save a little money on that. Batherson's a heck of a player. He's a heck of a skater. He's got a huge future, I think. And so this is a good deal for the team. It's a decent deal for the player. It's the best one he could get. I think right now that's good for everybody. The one that's looming, though, is, Sean Simpson had posted about Brady Tkachuk and his camp basically not getting what they called a, decent offer. And they're getting a little antsy. And that is a problem. Like, that's the one. Drake Batherson's all well and good. You should have had Tkachuk done before you're worried about what you're paying Drake Batherson. Because if you have an unhappy Brady Tkachuk to start the season, you're not in good shape there.
And Joe, what my thought was when Russ and I were talking about this before the show is that I will bet anything that this is a battle over term more than anything. There were rumors out there of Ottawa offering Tkachuk the same deal as Shabbat, which was 8 years, $64 million, $8 million per. He may want a shorter deal. He may want, like Austin Matthews, a 5-year
5 years. I think that's what he wants.
Or even the 2-year bridge deal. I don't think Ottawa's going to go for that. They're going to want long-term security. But for Tkachuk, he's the linchpin. He's the number one power forward. You want to get him locked up as long as possible, but 5 years might be all they're going to get.
Yeah, I have to believe term is definitely the issue there. And I'm sure the case is in Brady's mind, if you want me for 8 years, you got to buy up those UFA years. Like
Right.
you have no choice. You have to pay for those. And that's, Melnick will pay for the guys that he wants to keep there. And I have to imagine Tkachuk is one of those. But he's not going to go hog wild. I mean, Shabbat, you could argue he might have went a little bit too hard on, but the way he was trending and the way he can play, I get it. You don't want to get Subban, at some point in that and end up having to pay him $10 million a year. But in Kachuk's case, if you went 8 for 8 with him, I don't know. I think that would work out. Or maybe you have to go 8 for 9 with him. And in that case, maybe Ottawa sees that and they see Jeff Skinner's deal. And they say,
I think 9 by 8 rather is what he's looking for. And
yeah.
I think, look, again, Ottawa could only wait so long playing this sort of Sabres game with their talent. And that's what they're doing. That's what in this league right now, there are 4 or 5 there's probably a good 10 teams that will pay their guys, pay them what they should do it, be very proactive, and nobody has a problem. Then there's other teams that say, we're going to get to players, we're going to pay the way we are, but we just have to get on our feet. And, these are the ones that continually draft in the top 5 to 10 every year. And Ottawa's been that. And they're not out of that. They're not out of that hole yet. Whether Melnick's out of the financial hole, who knows? But at some point, this little thing that they have going is going to start going south because it's great to draft these young, great players. If you can't keep them, you turn into the Coyotes. And, that's what happens.
I found it interesting, Russ, that with Batherson signing that deal, he became the highest paid forward on the Ottawa Senators. Now, obviously, that's going to be until Tkachuk signs, but that just shows where their salaries are. I mean, he just eclipsed Colin White, but they're not spending a ton of money, and they have to worry about what they're going to have to pay Stützle in a year or two. So
my biggest worry for that franchise is you have a lot of these great young players, you don't have a lot of good veterans around them.
Yeah. Now, Farabee, he led the Flyers in goals last year with 20. He had a few more points than Batherson. He gets 6 years at $5 million. Again, he's still on his rookie deal until the following year. So that's 6 years starting next year. I mean, Russ, if they projected him right and they think that he's going to grow into the player that they believe he's going to be, then this is a good deal. But it's based on one good year.
Yeah, I think he could still, that 20 would be like 27 to 30, right, in a full season. And I think that's around his stopping point goal-wise. This talk that he's going to score like Simon Gagné, I think people need to pump the brakes on that. Simon Gagné, you go back to what he used to do in juniors. He's got his jersey hanging up in the rafters for a reason. Like, I love Joel Farabee, but I think he's a little bit below what Simon Gagné was able to do on the ice. But Farabee did show, hey, if you need me to score, I could score. If you need me to be a playmaker, I could be a playmaker. He's got those things. First thing is, this is the best deal that Fletcher has signed in the offseason for one of their guys. And that's, the Sanheim one, that's not the deal you wanted to sign, but they didn't have any more money, so they had to do it that way. That puts that player in jeopardy down the line because if he has a couple of great years, who knows? They may not be able to afford him. He may want to just look for his one big payday. Well, but this is a good one where they can retain him. Now, the guy who's got to worry here now is Travis Konecny, because if he doesn't get it going early this season, because, again, I don't think he has completely fit in with what AV wants him to do and wants that team to do, that's where it could get tricky for a guy like Konecny losing sort of his spot to a young guy like Farabee.
Well, Joe, what I was going to say is James Van Riemsdyk better make sure that his lease is up when the buyout comes next year, or when the trade window opens up after the season, because the only way I see them being able to afford Farabee is if they get rid of Van Riemsdyk next year, because they really don't have a lot of contracts dropping off, and Farabee might be taking his spot in the top 6, or he's already in the top 6, so taking a higher level in the top 6.
Yeah, he's the obvious choice, but it still feels weird to me because he's still a pretty good player. Maybe, I don't know if Russ disagrees with that. You see him a bit more.
No, he's a good player, Joe. You know what the problem is? he doesn't end up scoring when you need him to score. So last year, start of the season, he was tremendous. And he was tremendous for about 3/4 of that season. But when that team started dying, he died too. And everybody can't work that way. Sometimes it's got to take a player like that, a veteran, to sort of keep it going. And he's done that a few times. Look, they love the guy. He's great in the locker room. But if he can't be consistent with the way he's getting goals, it's not going to work out. Now, Mike always says, yeah, you could just trade him. It's not that easy to trade a guy, even on a 1-year deal for $7 million. There's very few teams. If the cap's flat again next year, or if it just goes up $1 million, how many teams are going to want to swallow up that contract?
Seattle. Yeah, did you say Seattle, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that makes a ton of sense because Botterill was supposedly after JVR when he was a free agent, and that kind of made sense. That kind of made a lot of sense for Buffalo at that time. Obviously, not now, but yeah, I could definitely see that being a place where he winds up, and Seattle's gonna have the cap space, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like JVR is a very useful guy to have around. Obviously, you don't like the money, but I don't know. Put him in the right role with the right team. He's a great guy to have.
I don't know what's the right role anymore, Joe. Like, I don't know. He scores a lot of power play. I actually, 5 on 5, what is the right role? Tell me.
Russ, I actually think the role that he played the last year in Toronto was the right role, which it ended up being career numbers. He was a third line left winger because he's defensively below average and on your top power play, and he scored 30 goals. That was perfect for him. He's not a top 6 because I don't think he can keep up with the pace anymore. And defensively, I think he's a little bit of a liability. So that right now is where I think he fits.
It's hard. I know it's hard to continue to pay a guy $7 million if he's going to get 60% of his points on the power play, and then you're only going to play him 12, 13 minutes a game because you're sort of protecting what he can do on the ice and what he can't do. Like that's going to be tough for the coach.
Now the other
he did play better all around last year, but not a ton better.
The other big deal that came out that was a little surprising was the Colton Parayko extension, 8-year max at $6.5 million. And here, Joe, this is definitely another in the long line of trading term for AAV. Because Parayko, I think he's 27 or 28. So you're talking about him going to age 36, which probably he's not going to do. If he does, that's great. But they actually, I think they spread out the AAV with adding another year or two, and then probably worry down the line about buying him out in those years or finding someplace a landing spot. But he's a good defenseman, but injuries have been a problem off and on with him. So, I mean, what did you think of that contract?
Yeah, I think the term was more surprising for me than anything. I think the money was perfect for St. Louis. That obviously works out right. But going 8 years with him it's a surprise.
Yeah.
I love him. I think he's a tremendous player, but you're right. The injuries are an issue. And those were some of the questions he got right away in the press conference about that, where it was, hey, where are you at? How you feeling? How's everything? And it's just like, no, I feel like I'll be good. Everything will be, get through it and we'll be fine. And I don't know, like it's a lot of money to hang on a guy. It's a lot of time to hang on a guy, but with his skill and his ability, he's absolutely they're probably their top guy. And there was a question as when his contract was up, I think it was after this season, of would he be a guy that would have been maybe a top guy in the free agent market to take away? Probably. And could St. Louis afford to lose him? No. They let Vince Dunn get away in the expansion draft, and I know there was some he was in and out of the lineup last year, but to lose a couple of guys that were in your top 6 just even a year ago in 2 years, like that's not great. That's not very good. And I don't know that they've got the D coming up through the pipeline to really be able to fill those shoes if they empty out.
Yeah, Perunovic, I know Russ has talked about him for a few years. The one good thing, they signed him for the same AAV as they signed Torrey Krug the previous year. And if you're looking at the free agent, and I know people immediately when Parayko's deal was signed, Toronto fans were saying this is good news because the Leafs probably followed the same model with Morgan Rielly, where I think they probably could get his his AAV down to an acceptable level if they go the 8-year max. And he's 27 years old. So, he's the type of defenseman who could be good into his mid-30s based on his skating and things of that nature. So that might set the market. But, I mean, if you're talking about anybody in terms of free agency being up at $9 million like Seth Jones or Makar, I mean, the prices are just getting obscene when it came.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have Riley over Parayko. I mean, I like Parayko. He's terrific defensively. He's okay offensively. He's not great offensively. And
the right-hand shot thing, Russ.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. I mean, look, right-hand shot is great, but if you're not a top point guy, it will help your power play to some degree. But at the end, you're still going to need like a real big offensive defenseman. So they're paying him for the size and the toughness and some offense and strong defense. Mm-hmm. Where a guy like Riley, I could still have him run my power play, and his defense is about as good. He's just not physical. So again, the fact that he's 6'6", 230 has helped Parayko here.
Yeah, I don't think Riley's going to run their power play anymore. I think it's going to be Rasmus Sandin, but I mean, we'll see.
But he could on another team. Is my point.
Yeah, but he just doesn't have the big shot, and Parayko does have a big shot.
Yeah.
Joe, on the Buffalo page this week, they signed Middlestat and Jokiharju to the same exact deal, 3 years, 2.5 AAV. Our colleague Paul Hamilton on the radio this morning said, they may have overpaid both of them a little bit, but it was because they had 2 years of arbitration, so the Sabres bought them out of those 2 years. Plus, at the end of that, they still have a year until they reach UFA, so it gives them a little cover. And with this organization right now, I think it's important for them to be able to hold on to players, because right now I don't know if anybody wants to come to Buffalo.
Yeah, that's certainly a part of it. It's good to have guys like this under RFA control too. And I agree with Paul. I think they overpaid a bit on Casey, because you're kind of hedging your bets, saying that what he was able to do under Granato at the end of last season is going to carry over, and he's going to build on that. So you're hoping that that's the case. And I think in Jokiharju's case, you've seen a lot of the good and some of the bad out of him over the last couple of years, and you're thinking, you're hedging your bet, saying, I bet we're going to see more of the good. We're going to keep him with Dahlin and let those guys kind of run our top pair here for the next year or 2 or 3, and go from there. Because if right-handed defenseman for the next 3 years at $2.5 million, it's not bad, especially because we've seen how good Jokiharju can be defensively, and he's not inept offensively either. So that works out good. I think it's an overpay on Middlestat. I think it's about right for Jokiharju, honestly. But yeah, buying him out of arbitration years helps.
Well, Russ, the criticism regarding Middlestat was that they signed him to this deal based on 28 games, a half a season under Don Granato, because what he did under Kruger was not much, but he did a lot in a lot of situations under Granato, and they're betting that he will grow and be a good, probably number 2 center under Granato.
Well, yeah, I mean, the issue is they had to pay him this if they're slotting him in as a number 2 center. Like that's what it's costing you in the league. I mean, that's on the low end too, for a second line center. So I think they had to do that deal. I think that probably Middlestat wanted more term, and the team didn't want to give it to him. And we'll see where that lies at the end of this deal, because if Middlestat does reach his potential, it'll become a very interesting thing. Jokiharju is interesting because he does have a great shot. To go along with what Joe said. Again, I don't know when the Sabres are going to sort of show, hey, we really want to keep you as a player to some of these guys. And I guess we'll find out with Dahlin. Now, Dahlin may be the one that doesn't want to go too much on the long term, and they might want to go on long term and keep the AAV lower. But again, they don't have any cap problems. So the fact that this hasn't gotten done yet, it's kind of baffling to me, because it didn't matter about any of these other deals to get the Dahlin deal done. That's the funny thing about all this, and yet it hasn't gotten done.
Joe, I think it's the same thing as Tkachuk. I think the Sabres ideally would want to get Dahlin locked up as long as possible, and maybe I seriously doubt Dahlin is they're going to agree on something shorter than 4 years. I think they want at least 5, maybe 6. But they're going to have to pay through the nose to get it. I mean, I think with somebody who's a former number 1 overall pick, who's had his ups and downs, but I think he's probably going to be in the $8.5-9 million range.
Yeah, that certainly seems like the going price now, especially when you see what Werenski, got extended for. You see what some of these other guys got. I think that's the case. I also think the negotiations with him shifted when all of those guys, when Makar signed, Jones signed, all these guys got deals. I think the conventional thinking before all that broke loose was get Dahlin on a bridge deal. We'll see where he is in 2 years and we'll go from there. Whereas now you probably don't want to do that because these guys have already, Makar and all of them have already gotten paid out, Heiskanen and everybody. They've all cashed in a big way. And now I wonder if the Sabres don't want to risk having him, blow up the next year or two. And then suddenly they're looking at paying him over $10 million a year. And I don't think they want to do that. They gave Jack $10 million a year, and it's a whole different situation. But I think in Dahlin's case, I think the Sabres' focus has changed from doing a short term to a long term. And now maybe Dahlin's thinking, well, geez, these guys are getting a lot of money now. So maybe it's time for me to go a Matthews way, say 5 years, take me up to free agency, and then dare Buffalo to try to extend me or get there, get things correct and start winning.
It would never be a buzzcast if we didn't mention Jack Eichel. And since you mentioned him,
my bad.
We had the meeting last week where apparently the NHL, the PA, Jack's representatives and the Sabres met in Buffalo. And coming out of that, the only thing that happened was Pat Brisson taking over for Peter Fish. That move appears to be aimed at getting a deal done. We've heard some rumors about there being some sort of agreement on surgery, but we haven't had any reports of that actually happening. Where do you think things stand, or is it just a staring contest right now?
I think it's a different kind of contest now with Brisson in charge. I think that's Jack taking a step. I view this as kind of a Cold War, honestly, because there hasn't, any direct conversations that have happened, none of that's leaked out. Absolutely none of that's leaked out. The only thing that's even leaked out at all is the surgery that Jack wants to get. But anytime, in the past, while it was, Peter Fish running things for Jack, anytime the Sabres had a comment on Eichel, they would have a comment in return very shortly thereafter. In this case, both sides are clamming up. Not that Kevin Adams is answering any phone calls, not from the Boston area right now, but to me, this is it's a matter of just like flexing without directly taking a shot. And I think part of that meeting was to try to bridge that gap. But I think if you're Jack and you're bringing on Pat Brisson in your corner, that to me says you're ready for a battle if it comes to it, because Brisson's been through it all. He's the top agent in the NHL, and he's had fights with teams, not necessarily on this kind of issue, but on this kind of level. So he's got the experience, and he knows how to get things right for his clients. So I don't know that that's a fight Kevin Adams and the Pegulas necessarily want to get into, especially in this case where it's a disagreement over an operation a player wants and versus what the team wants. And I know the CBA gets in the way of that. But if it comes down to a grievance getting filed and an arbitration hearing, I don't know that I want to deal with a Brisson argument necessarily in court, because all the arguments sort of line up in Jack's favor. And that goes, that's even before we get into finding out anything about, things that may have, gone wrong in his view in Buffalo with previous injuries.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have one more thing. So with the OHL suspending Logan Mailloux indefinitely, the Canadians now have a first-round pick who has no place to play. And this is part of the problem as to why this pick was such a bad idea, because you could have foreseen this happening. I think everybody saw this happening. And now, where is he going to play? He's only 18. Can't put him in the AHL. Where's he going to go? What team is really going to take him? I know there's some smart-ass answers out there, Mike, but, there's only so many problems that teams want to take.
I was going to say Sweden's out.
Yeah, Sweden's out.
Could the KHL possibly, but he's an 18.
I doubt it.
It might be the USH. It might be the USHL.
Maybe, but they've already got some PR issues with some of the other guys they've taken or taken back. I don't know how many times they're going to want to do that either. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but is there a chance that there's no place he could play this year? Yeah,
Well,
there's a chance.
Could he go? I mean, if he's not eligible to go to the Q or go to the OHL, can he play in the Q? Could he play in
They'll all go by David Branch's thing. They're not going to – it's part of the CHL. Yeah, they're not going to go against that. So it's going to have to be a completely different league. You know, will it be, I don't know, the North American Hockey League? Like, I don't know. But
that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. But at the end of the day –
yeah, that's not good for his development. I mean, if you could,
that's what I was going to say. That's
Finland, Switzerland, or Germany would probably be better. I mean, you know, there's
do they want him? They may not want him.
Yeah, it's an ugly situation. Just quickly, Russ, let's touch on the Edmonton Oilers prospects. Two first, Dylan Holloway, a former first-round pick.
Yeah, I really like the way he's progressing. I mean, he's a center. He's tremendous on faceoffs already. He's really good on defense. His offense is coming around, but I don't really expect to see the kind of offense that he had when he was in junior hockey. Like those were crazy numbers. I think he's a different kind of player now, but he's the kind of player I actually think, because he's less offensive than like a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but is better at some of those other things, that could be, you know, a nice thing for Edmonton to have two centers that actually are sort of well-rounded like that. And that's, I think, could help him in a couple of years. Evan Bouchard, it's just mind-boggling that he's only had like 20-something, 21, something like that NHL games. The kid can play. He's a tremendous skater. He can hit. He's got offense in his game. I know people sometimes were taking sort of a little bit of issues with his skating. I think that's fixed. I really don't see the problem here other than Dave Tippett, to be honest. At some point you got to put this kid in there and see what you got.
Well, maybe it's a possibility of like Duncan Keith taking him under his wing, because I mean, similar types of defensemen, although, we know that there are a lot of flawed defensemen on the Oilers roster, and two of them being ex-Leafs and Tyson Barrie and Cody Ceci. I think one of them was absolutely terrible signing, but I think
that's the other thing. It's like they have really, by loading up on all of these vets, taken away possible roles for him too. And that's a whole other situation.
Joe, I think Bouchard and his development is one of the more important factors with the Oilers, whether they have aspirations. I think they're a borderline, even with the signing of Hyman, I still think they're a borderline playoff team. With that goaltending, I think that goaltending undercuts everything, but their defense, Clefbaum's probably not going to be there, and you got one half of their defense in Barrie and Ceci that I think are flawed. Keith is 38 years old. I think they need Bouchard to be a good defenseman this year for them to have success.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And the way his development has gone has been very, very odd, because he's a guy that I think most of us figured was already going to be a factor in their top six, especially because they've always had issues. And you're right, like Clefbaum being out it hurts them. And when he comes back, is he going to even be the same kind of player?
Right.
That's a tough question to answer. Darnell Nurse now has a monster contract to live up to. And, that brings a whole lot of different pressure. I mean, Oilers love him. Fans seem to love him too. But when you got a bigger price tag on your head, the view changes a bit. So I think in Bouchard's case, I mean, there's so much potential there. I can't say it's not there anymore. It's still there, but he needs the right situation. He needs the right people to work with. I think you're right. Keith is the guy to have him work with. Maybe not necessarily pair him with, but get Keith in his ear, get him, telling him about, the ins and outs of the game, and just get him better prepared for this, because when it comes time, and there will be a time, because there's always issues in Edmonton, they're going to need to count on him. And, hey, if he takes a step up this year, that's going to be huge, because the Oilers counting on Mike Smith to have the same kind of year he did last year is asking a lot. And Kotkaniemi, well, I mean, that's Pete Chiarelli's hangover right there.
Yeah, and a year ago, they clocked Bouchard's shot at 103 miles an hour.
I was waiting for Russ to mention Alex Stalock. Okay, great show, guys. We'll be back on Monday, maybe, depending on availability of certain people, for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Joe Yerdon, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.